And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We're talking with Natalie Zaman this hour, author of Magical Destinations of the Northeast. So, Natalie, you were telling us how when you were in fifth grade, you read this book and you started to get into this idea of witches. What was it in this character? I mean, you said like she was a lot like you, this character in the book, but was it just something that like instantly resonated with you? Was there something she went through? I mean, what was it that really, if you can recall, like really spoke to you so much that really drew you in?
Well, the first thing would probably be that she lived in an apartment house. And it seems like such a simple thing.
Yeah.
But in the book, a lot of the kids in the school lived in neighborhoods and in houses. And she lived in an apartment house. And I was one of the very few people who lived in an apartment when I was going to school. And again, it was a small Catholic school, so it wasn't like there was this very large selection of people to to go by.
Right.
But just that very small thing, very mundane detail kind of was the first connector. Then there were other things like going to the library and kind of being on the fringes and on the outside, like going to a birthday party, say, and kind of being on the edge and observing rather than being...
Not being part of the in crowd.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. And she made her own way, and she was fine, and she was successful, and she was powerful. And I'm saying this now, 40 years later, but I kind of got it then, too.
Yeah.
So that kind of made it an admirable thing. Witches were powerful.
Yeah. And so as you started to, I guess, research this more, read more books and stuff, did your parents notice that, like, you were really getting into this kind of not so acceptable stuff by Roman Catholic standards?
Well, I mean, you got to remember, too, there just wasn't a lot of material out there.
Right.
When I was in high school, that's when I got my first deck of tarot cards, and I started reading and everything else. And my mother would raise an eyebrow, and she still does. It's so funny, bless her. My mother just is going to turn, I think, is 89 this year, or 88 or 89, something like that. We'll take off a year for 88, right? And she still doesn't get it, but in a way she does, because when we did the book launch for Magical Destinations, she came, and people came up to me afterwards and like, "Oh, she's so proud of you," and that that meant the world to me. So it really didn't matter at that point,
right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
So she kind of gets it, but she still prays for me. I know that.
Well, you do have to admit that one thing that I've learned over the years is that actually Roman Catholics are probably the most mystic of the major religions. Although Judaism has its own, with the Kabbalah, its own mysticism, but I find more Catholics are kind of open to kind of these fringy kinds of things, because there's a lot of pagan rituals that got subsumed into the religion over the years when they, came along, and in England, right, the bastion of the Druids, a lot of Druidic things like the whole Christmas celebration, the Festival of Lights was a Druid celebration. And I've seen in South America where the South American culture took to Roman Catholicism because their quote unquote spirits and gods they align them with all the different saints. So it is one that lends itself towards those kinds of inquiries.
Yep, I've heard it called the most pagan of the Christianities.
Yeah.
Catholicism. Yeah.
So when though did your interest become something that really sort of took over your life, or not took over, but really became a major driving force for you?
Okay, I would say I would call myself a dabbler until about... I guess I was married and I had my first son, and I had gone back to school. I was thinking of what to do for an advanced degree, and I was considering art history.
Okay.
I was teaching at the time too, so I was like, what would be a nice complement to the English degree? Well, I guess I could do more English, but let's do art history instead.
Okay.
So I was taking classes at Rutgers, and one of the classes that I took was a course on Byzantine art. It was really fascinating stuff. And I remember sitting in the classroom and them pulling the professor pulling up a slide of a tomb that was a Christian tomb, but it was Apollo as Jesus. It was not the historical Jesus. Now, you got to remember that for me, Jesus was the kindly faced man with the beard.
Yeah.
He was, ageless, gentle, not blonde Apollo.
Right, right.
And I remember there are moments in life. They're like they're called the rug rippers.
Yeah.
They just they're just pulled out from under you, and you're like,
Right.
what the hell just happened?
Right.
And anyway, that was one of them for me. And I remember looking at that slide and thinking, oh my gosh, everything I've been taught since I was a child was a lie. And I mean, that was a very extreme response to it. And since then, I think my whole philosophy on that has matured, because there's still a lot that Catholicism has to offer me. It's part of my heritage, it's part of my ancestry. By honoring and knowing now where some of these things came from, I think I'm honoring on a deeper level.
Right.
But yeah, that was a moment.
And how long have you been like blogging and writing about these topics? I mean, they've obviously been a part of your life for so many years. When did you actually start, writing and educating others about it?
I would say publicly since maybe 2005.
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, I mean, that's when I started putting things out there.
Right.
And it's bit by bit. It's kind of a courageous act in a way. I pat myself on the back for that one.
You should, absolutely, because you can be a role model for other people who maybe have the same beliefs or same similar ideas, but are afraid to kind of step out because it is still, relatively speaking, even though it's more acceptable in the mainstream than it used to be, it's still relatively on the fringe.
And just to tie back into the quote this morning, it's like you have to take the risk.
Yeah.
If you want to live, if you want to grow, if you want to keep, evolving and whatnot, you got to take the risks.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Okay, so let's come to your book. How did you come to write Magical Destinations?
I guess it started when I started doing Wandering Witch for Ann Niven for BBI Media. That's back when it was New Witch magazine. Now it's Witches and Pagans.
Okay.
And I had this idea where I was like, oh, let's write about and kind of step back from that. I had made a trip to Glastonbury. I went with a friend of mine who lives over in England, and we went to Glastonbury, and I had such a profound experience over there. And we also went into the town, and the town had all sorts of wonderful little shops and things like that. And I was like, oh, I really like to write about this experience. So I wrote a proposal to her, and I'm like, hey, how about like a kind of a magical travel column? Wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that be a cool thing? Let's tell people about magical communities and whatnot and where to find them. And to my surprise, she said, sure. So I did the Glastonbury piece, and she liked it. And to my surprise, she wanted another one. So, and then it just kind of...
Did you make it over to Findhorn when you were there?
No.
Okay.
Next time.
And Glastonbury, there's someone who wrote a book all about the earth chakras, that like the power points on earth is the earth chakras, and Glastonbury is one of the earth chakras. I remember saying, I think it's the heart chakra of the planet.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It's a really, really interesting place. I mean, I remember climbing to the top of the tour, and it was like kind of like a slippery day. I mean, sometimes it's always a slippery day out there.
Yeah.
But my friend who like just couldn't make the climb up, so it was myself and my son, and there was nobody else there. I've gotten really lucky that way in going to places where there's nobody. Which is kind of a cool thing. Like, I would never get to some place and be alone.
Right.
So go up to the top of the door, and I'm standing there, and just fucking bird flies overhead. It was just like one of those, yes, you were meant to be here, and whatnot. And it was just the quiet and the, for some people, I guess like people have visions and whatnot. For me, it was just the feeling, and it was enough,
Right. Yeah, sure. And you can find all kinds of things. I mean, I know there's the whole science of ley lines that are around the planet and how they discovered them, right? That I think it was I forget the name of the gentleman who was looking at a map of like all the sacred sites in England, and he noticed even though they were like hundreds of miles apart, they were like in a straight line from each other. And then he discovered like there is actual like these energetic lines that run through the earth that are now called ley lines. And I remember walking through a friend's property once, and I was just like walking along this trail to a little river that's in the back, and I got to this one spot, and I felt like I just walked through a wall of energy. And I stepped back, and I could really feel it. And then I look to my right, and I see, like, in the distance, sort of 3 or 4 trees in a straight line. I look to my left, and there are another 3 or 4 trees in a straight line. And I realized, oh, wow, this is a ley line right here, you know, in just the back of somebody's farm.
Great book for that is The Lay Hunter's Companion.
Okay.
It's I can't remember the name of the author, but if you just Google it, really good on, like, you know, how to find them, what to do, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Good manual.
Cool. Okay, so you started sort of writing this as a column. How did the idea come about to actually turn a bunch of these columns into a book?
We well, the book isn't really like a compilation of the columns. It actually kind of goes beyond what I've done so far for the magazine. My family and I made a trip out west. Back in 2013, we drove from Jersey out to California and then back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool
Awesome
road trip.
Awesome road trip. Anybody should do it if they get the chance, if they get the opportunity.
Right.
And, among the places that we stopped, because, you know, there's only so much time.
Yes.
We stopped at Mount Rushmore, but my husband wanted to stop at Devil's Tower. He was like, "Oh, we must stop at Devil's Tower," and I was like, "All right, you know, we'll go there." It wasn't a particular place that I wanted to see, but I was like, "If it makes you happy, that's wonderful." So, of course, right? So we go to Mount Rushmore first, and it's if you've ever been there, it's very built up.
Right.
Devil's Tower is completely different. It's, you know, and when we went there, it was June, beautiful day, middle of the day, and again, lucky or not, we were the only ones there. And that meant a very profound experience for us. But when we left, I was like, why isn't there anyone here? And that kind of triggered something for me, because there are some places where when people don't go, the place goes away.
Yes.
And I was like, this place cannot go away. I mean, obviously, it's not going to go away, but, you know, you don't want it being taken over.
Disrepair. And,
exactly. You know, so I guess that was the inspiration. It was like, I want to tell people about these places. And then, you know, also that as a country of sacred sites, sacred sites, we're really underappreciated.
Totally.
You know, so that kind of came together with it as well.
Oh, cool. So then how long did it take you to write this book?
From proposal to the probably about 2.5 years.
2.5 years. Wow.
With all the research.
And was it a lot more research than you thought it would be, or did you kind of go into it knowing that, like, this was going to be a lot of work?
It started out as something completely different than what we
ended up
with, but it turned out to be a lot more research.
Okay.
Which is good. I learned a lot.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, let's find out what's in this book, and let's tease our audience and give them some good reasons why they should go out and buy it, okay? All right, so everybody please stay tuned. You're listening to Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, and we'll be right back.